Welcome to Let Jesus Be Your Doctor, the true path to healing for body and soul.
Have you ever noticed what happens to the atmosphere of a room when someone inside it is truly deeply in physical pain?
Oh, it gets intensely quiet.
Yeah, the noise of the world just stops.
Mm.
The deadlines you were so, intensely worried about that morning, the petty argument you had with a friend yesterday, the anxious rush to get to the next appointment, it all just evaporates.
Right, the air gets heavy.
Exactly. And in that profoundly difficult, sacred silence, we're left staring at the ceiling. Right? Confronted by a question that human beings have been whispering in the dark for millennia. Why?
Why does the body fail us?
Right. Why is there so much suffering?
It really becomes this intensely quiet space, doesn't it? It's a space that strips away absolutely everything superficial.
Yeah.
We spend so much of our waking lives trying to categorize our experiences neatly, We say, well, healthy is good and sick is bad.
Right. It's a binary.
It's a total binary. We want our medical diagnoses to operate like mechanics or engineering.
Like fixing a car.
Exactly. We want to find the broken part, fix the broken part, and just move on with our plans. But when you are forced to step into the spiritual dimensions of suffering, that binary way of thinking completely falls apart.
It totally shatters.
Yeah, you realize that what is happening to the body is only a fraction of the actual story.
It really does fall apart. And in 1963, a mystic named Bertha Dudde recorded a revelation that completely shatters that modern clinical view of being sick.
It really does.
It takes that binary of, healthy equals good and sick equals bad and entirely upends it.
Completely turns it on its head.
So today, we are stepping away from the rush of daily life, away from the constant flood of data and notifications to conduct a very reverent, meditative exploration of the single text.
And it deserves that time.
It really does. It's Revelation number 8653, titled Krankheiten und Heilung, which translates to illness and healing. And we're going to look at this alongside a highly curated collection of complementary insights from other mystics and biblical texts.
And I want to just tell the listener, the intention for this deep dive is not to rush.
No, not at all.
We're not going to skim through a summary or just, give you a list of quick takeaways. We want to genuinely absorb a very specific, deeply challenging spiritual message.
A message about the nature of the human soul.
Yes.
Yeah.
About the actual hidden meaning of physical suffering. And about what it really means to place your faith in a divine physician.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to us right now, we invite you to just pause, take a deep breath.
Let your shoulders drop.
Exactly. Open your mind and prepare for a journey into the spiritual architecture of pain.
If you've ever wondered why suffering exists in your own life, or if you've felt that deep visceral frustration when your body just refuses to do what you want it to do,
Which we all have.
right? Then this is for you. We're going to look at illness not as a biological failure, not as a random, cruel accident of nature, but as a deeply intentional, highly calibrated spiritual tool.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
It is. I want to start right at the beginning of Dudde's text, because the opening line is, well, it's jarring. It forces you to immediately reconsider your relationship with your own body.
It doesn't pull any punches.
No, it doesn't. I kept reading this one sentence over and over. She writes, Wenn ihr den Segen der Krankheit wisset, wenn ihr wisset, dass die Krankheit dazu beiträgt, dass sich die Seele entschlackt.
Let's just sit with those first few words for a moment.
Yeah.
Wenn ihr den Segen der Krankheit wisset.
Mm-hmm.
If you knew about the blessing of illness.
It's wild to even say that out loud.
It is. It's a completely paradoxical statement to the modern ear. Blessing and illness are usually at opposite ends of our vocabulary.
They're literal antonyms in our daily lives.
Right. We pray for blessings and we pray against illness.
You don't call a fever a blessing, you call it an attack on your immune system.
You do. But the text doesn't apologize for the paradox. What's fascinating here is how it leans into it by using a very specific, incredibly evocative word.
Entschlacken.
Yes, entschlacken. In German, entschlacken means to purge, to remove slag, to clear out the toxic impurities.
It sounds so heavy.
It's a heavy industrial term, right? It's used in metallurgy or in deep biological detoxification. But here, the text applies this industrial, gritty process directly to the Seele.
To the soul.
Exactly, to the soul.
Ist that?
Dass sich die Seele entschlackt. That the soul purges its impurities.
Wow.
To understand this, we have to look at the fundamental spiritual premise operating underneath this entire revelation. The physical body is a temporary garment, but the soul is eternal.
So the body is just a vessel.
Right. And from this vantage point, illness is framed not as a divine punishment. It is not God being angry with you or abandoning you.
Which is how it feels so often.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
But the text says it is a deliberate, necessary mechanism designed to lighten your spiritual load before you inevitably transition into the spiritual realm.
I want to spend some time on this word, entschlacken, because it paints such a vivid, almost violent picture of what is actually happening when we're sick.
It's not a gentle word.
No, it makes me think of the ancient process of smelting gold. If you've ever studied how pure gold is refined from the earth, you know it is not a gentle process.
Not at all.
You don't just take a lump of ore and wash it with some soap and warm water, right?
Yeah.
You take the raw, earthbound ore, which is hopelessly tangled up with all sorts of useless rock, minerals, dirt, heavy metals.
You throw it into a crucible.
Yes, you throw it into a crucible, and then you apply intense, relentless, incredibly uncomfortable heat.
And the heat is the absolute prerequisite.
Right.
Without the heat, the gold remains trapped inside the rock forever.
Forever. And it has to be extreme heat. Under that overwhelming temperature, the pure gold finally begins to melt. And as it melts, it separates from the schlacken, the slag, the dross, the impurities. The heavy, useless slag is forced to the surface by the heat, so the metalsmith can physically skim it off and throw it away.
Leaving only the pure metal behind.
Exactly, leaving only the pure, radiant metal behind. And when I read this revelation, I realized Dudde is saying that the human soul sometimes desperately requires the heat of physical illness.
The heat of the crucible.
Yeah. The high fever, the aching joints, the absolute bone-deep exhaustion, that is the heat of the crucible.
And what is the slag?
Well, the slag is our worldly attachments, you know. It's our ego. It's our obsession with our career status, our pride, our stubbornness.
Our endless digital distractions.
Yes, the illness is the furnace burning all of that away, separating the eternal, pure part of who you are from the heavy, useless slag of material obsession.
That is a profoundly accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And the text goes further to explain exactly what this purification process yields in the human personality.
What does it say?
It states that this heat, this illness, helps you achieve Geduld und Ergebung in meinen Willen, patience and submission or surrender to the divine will.
Surrender.
Yes, it explicitly says, und ihr euch dann meinem Willen nicht mehr widersetzt, and that you then no longer oppose my will.
Wow. No longer opposing.
Think about the sheer amount of resistance we carry around with us every single day.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
We spend our lives trying to force the universe to conform to our schedules.
Yeah.
We push, we strive, we try to control everything.
We really do.
But when you are truly, deeply ill, that illusion of control is shattered. You cannot force your will upon the world anymore. You have to stop.
You're biologically forced to submit.
Exactly.
It's stunning, but honestly, it also goes against every biological survival instinct we have.
It really does.
I mean, our nervous system is wired to fight pain, to flee from it. Dudde is asking us to override our own biology.
It's a huge ask.
When you have the flu, or something worse, you literally have to lie down. You stare at the ceiling. You cancel your meetings. Your world shrinks to the size of your bed.
You lie down and you wait. You are stripped of your identity as a doer or an achiever, and you are reduced to simply being.
Just being.
You are forced to practice patience. And inside that forced stillness, the text makes a profound, quiet promise.
What's the promise?
It says, wenn ihr alles hinnehmet, wie es über euch kommt, als von mir gut für euch erkennt, dann werdet ihr auch wissen, dass ich auch den Zeitpunkt der Gesundung erkenne.
So, translating that.
If you accept everything as it comes over you, recognizing it as recognized by me as good for you, then you will also know that I also know the time of recovery.
That is such a heavy, demanding level of trust.
It is.
To look at your own bodily suffering, to feel the pain vibrating in your nerves, and to say, the divine physician has prescribed this specific heat for my soul, and I will not fight it.
It takes immense spiritual maturity.
But wrestling with this text, you know, it inevitably brings up a massive theological roadblock.
I know where you're going with this.
Right. If illness is such a perfect tool for purification, if the heat of the crucible is entirely controlled by an all-loving, omnipotent, divine physician...
Why doesn't God just heal us the exact moment we learn the lesson?
Exactly. The second I look up from my sickbed and say, okay, God, I get it, I surrender, my ego is gone, why doesn't the pain just vanish instantly?
Right.
Why do people suffer for months or years after they have seemingly submitted?
That is the pivotal question of the entire text. And exploring it leads us directly into one of the most intellectually and spiritually rigorous parts of Dudde's revelation.
Let's get into it.
It forces us to confront the divine dilemma, the tension between God's ability to offer instant healing and his absolute commitment to preserving human free will. Let's look at the exact phrasing she records regarding sudden miraculous healing.
I was stuck on this exact line because Dudde flat out refuses the idea of automatic sudden healing, and she brings up this concept that is deeply challenging.
Read it for us.
She writes, dass ich euch schlagartig gesunden lasse, werde ich aber nicht tun eurer Willensfreiheit wegen, denn ihr werdet dann zum Glauben an mich und meine Macht gezwungen, sollet aber ohne Zwang zu diesem Glauben gelangen.
That is such a crucial passage.
To translate that directly for the listener, I will not let you recover suddenly because of your free will, for then you would be forced to believe in me and my power, but you should arrive at this belief without coercion.
This specific concept, Glaubenswang, which means coerced belief or forced faith, is the linchpin of this entire spiritual framework.
Force faith.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that we have to unpack what forced faith actually means. True love and true faith must, by their very definition, be freely chosen.
Right. If I force you to love me, it's not love.
Exactly. If they are not freely given, they're not real. They're just a mechanical response to stimuli. Imagine for a moment a world where God operated differently.
Okay.
Imagine if God performed an undeniable, instantaneous, scientifically verifiable miracle every single time someone prayed for healing.
Like a cosmic vending machine.
A cosmic vending machine, right?
You put in a prayer of surrender, you press the button, and out pops a sudden, miraculous healing.
Exactly. If the universe functioned like that, human beings wouldn't believe in God out of a genuine developing love. They wouldn't believe out of deep internal spiritual growth.
They'd just believe because it's obvious.
Right. They would believe out of sheer, undeniable proof. It would be a mathematical certainty.
Right.
You wouldn't need faith at all. You would just have data.
It's just a transaction.
And while it sounds incredibly appealing for our physical comfort, spiritually, it would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Wow.
It would strip you of your autonomy. It would force your intellect to acknowledge God's power because the evidence would be overwhelming, but it wouldn't necessarily change your heart.
You'd just be terrified of him or using him.
You would obey God out of a desire for the healing reward or out of terror of his power rather than out of love. God desires a relationship based on free, mutual choice, not a dictatorship based on the constant display of overwhelming, terrifying power.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because I understand the theology of that, but I want to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who might be in the middle of a chronic illness right now.
That's completely fair.
Because when you are at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, your body vibrating with pain, and you are begging for relief, being told your healing is delayed to protect your free will feels almost cruel.
It does.
Isn't there a massive tension here? I mean, we are talking about an all-loving, infinite, compassionate God, but this God watches us suffer, sometimes for agonizingly long periods, just to preserve our freedom of choice.
It's an incredibly tough reality to swallow.
How does a person in actual, literal agony process that without becoming deeply bitter?
It might be the most difficult concept in all of human spirituality. The tension you're describing is the absolute core of the human condition.
It's so hard.
We naturally view pain as the ultimate enemy because our perspective is severely limited by time. We see a lifespan of maybe 80 or 90 years. Every day of pain feels like a tragic loss of that limited time.
Exactly. I'm losing my life to this bed.
But this text is asking us to shift our perspective to the eternal, to a timeline where the soul exists forever.
Forever.
From the eternal vantage point, a few years of severe physical suffering that successfully burns away the ego and prevents an eternity of spiritual darkness changes the calculus entirely. The divine physician is operating on an eternal timeline, not an earthly one.
The heat of the crucible again?
Exactly.
The metalsmith knows that taking the gold out of the fire too early means it remains impure forever.
Precisely. And to address that very real, valid human agony you mentioned, the 3 a.m. isolation.
Yeah, the loneliness of it.
The revelation is very clear that God does not just abandon us in this crucible to figure it out alone. He doesn't just sit back and watch us writhe in pain.
Okay, that's a relief to hear.
Realizing that God is intentionally delaying supernatural healing creates a terrifying sense of isolation. If God is waiting, who is helping us in the meantime?
Right.
This is why Dudde immediately draws a sharp line between divine, miraculous healing and the earthly care provided by human hands. God provides companions, earthly remedies, and an entire system of mutual care to support us through the purification process.
Yes, the text shifts its focus directly to the medical field and to human interaction here.
It's a fascinating pivot.
It states, Zudem besiegt, dass der Erdenlebenszweck aller Menschen darin besteht, in Liebe zu dienen. Furthermore, you know that the purpose of earthly life for all people is to serve in love.
To serve in love.
And it goes on to make a very specific promise about medicine. It says that God will absolutely bless those who are ready to help with physical ailments, who study the body and create means to heal it.
He encourages it.
He does. Denn solange der liebende Hilfswill Anlass von Forschungen jeglicher Art ist, wird auch mein Segen darauf ruhen. As long as the loving desire to help is the motive for research of any kind, my blessing will rest upon it.
This is a profound, beautiful validation of science, medicine, and human ingenuity.
It really is.
But it comes with a massive, highly specific spiritual caveat.
The catch.
Yes. What's so fascinating and frankly deeply confronting is how the text draws a razor-sharp line between two different motivations for creating medicine.
The motive is everything.
God blesses medical research and physical treatments if and only if they are driven by a loving desire to help a suffering fellow human being. The invisible internal intent of the researcher or the doctor is what actually draws down the divine blessing.
But then comes the warning, and this is where the text gets incredibly provocative, especially when we look at our modern world of massive, multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industries.
Let's hear it.
The Revelation says, Ist jedoch der Erwerb irdischer Güter der Antrieb, solche Mittel herzustellen, dann werden sie zumeist wirkungslos oder schädigend für den menschlichen Körper sein, trotz scheinbarer Besserung.
Then heavy.
To translate, if, however, the acquisition of earthly goods, meaning profit, wealth, material gain, is the motive for producing such means, then they will mostly be ineffective or harmful to the human body despite apparent improvement.
Let's just stop and hold that thought for a second.
Yeah, please.
Think about the billions of dollars flowing through the global pharmaceutical industry today. Think about the corporate structures built entirely around quarterly profits.
It's staggering.
To look at that massive global system and say that the unseen spiritual intent behind a pill alters its actual biological efficacy that is terrifyingly profound.
It upends everything.
The text is arguing that you cannot separate the physical chemistry of a treatment from the moral and spiritual intention of the person who created it.
Wow.
If a medicine is born out of greed, out of a desire for market dominance, the text says it will ultimately harm the soul or the body. And notice that chilling phrase, trotz scheinbarer Besserung, despite apparent improvement.
Despite apparent improvement.
It might mask the symptoms. It might make the biological machinery run smoother for a while. But spiritually, it is toxic.
That completely upends how we think about healthcare. It means that healing isn't just about molecules interacting with receptors in the body.
Not at all.
It makes me think of an analogy to try and grasp this.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Imagine earthly medicine, a pill, a surgical procedure, a physical therapy routine. It's like a beautifully wrapped gift box. The physical pill itself is just the cardboard box. It's nothing more than the delivery mechanism. What actually heals the person is the invisible intent that is placed inside that box before it is handed over.
I love that. The intent is the gift.
Exactly. If the box is filled with the doctor's genuine, compassionate love, if a nurse hands you that pill with a silent prayer for your well-being, then when you open it, God's blessing pours out and aids the healing process.
Beautiful.
But if the box is filled only with a pharmaceutical company's desire to meet a profit margin or a doctor's desire to get you out of the room as fast as possible to see the next billing patient,
The box is empty?
the box is spiritually empty. The cardboard looks exactly the same. The chemical compound is identical, but the inside is devoid of the divine healing current. And ultimately, consuming that empty box is harmful to your soul's development, even if your headache goes away.
That analogy captures the spiritual physics of this revelation perfectly. The physical matter is secondary to the spiritual energy it carries. The text even reinforces this by stating, Ebenso können die harmlosesten Mittel genügen, eine Heilung herbeizuführen, weil dies mein Wille ist und ich den Zeitpunkt einer Heilung für gekommen erachte.
Which means?
Even the most harmless, simple means can suffice to bring about a healing, because it is my will and I consider the time for healing to have come.
So the medicine doesn't even have to be complex.
Exactly. It's not the complexity of the chemical compound or the price tag of the treatment that performs the miracle. It could be a simple cup of tea, a cold compress, or just someone holding your hand.
It's a cold compress in love.
If it's delivered with pure love and it aligns with the divine will, it becomes a conduit for absolute healing.
But Dudde is also very grounded in reality here. She explicitly mentions that finding true healers, doctors, nurses, researchers, who act purely out of a connection to God and devoid of earthly greed is incredibly rare.
Very rare.
She writes, Es sind aber selten nur solche Heile zu finden. Such healers are rarely found.
And because they are so rare, people naturally turn to unblessed means, to treatments driven by profit. And as a result, neither their body nor their soul finds true, lasting healing.
So this puts us in a very difficult landscape.
It really does.
If we are navigating a world where true, pure-intentioned earthly medicine is rare, how do we process our suffering? How do we access this divine healing?
That's the question, isn't it?
To really understand what a true spiritual perspective on suffering looks like, we cannot just rely on this one text. We have to look at how this exact message echoes across time through different voices who have touched this same spiritual reality.
And this is where our deep dive widens its lens. When a spiritual truth is genuine, when it is truly foundational to the human experience, you will almost always find it refracted through different mystics, different eras, and different theological traditions.
They all sort of point to the same thing.
They might use different vocabulary, but they all point toward the exact same profound reality of the divine physician and the necessity of the soul's surrender.
Exactly. Let's bring in a chorus of these mystic voices. Our source material curates insights from several incredible spiritual teachers, and I want us to take our time with each of them because they each offer a different angle on the crucible of illness.
Where should we start?
Let's start with Bruno Groening. He was a very well-known, often misunderstood German healer operating in the mid-20th century. People flocked to him by the thousands.
Right, he was a massive figure.
But his core teaching was remarkably simple, almost shockingly so. He said, Gott ist der größte Arzt. Der Mensch kann nur helfen, heilen kann nur Gott.
God is the greatest doctor. Man can only help, only God can heal.
Exactly. He spoke constantly of a Heilstrom, a healing stream or divine current that is always flowing. But he insisted that this current only enters a person when they open their heart and completely stop fighting their circumstances.
Notice how perfectly Groening's teaching mirrors Dudde's concept of surrender. The human being has to become entirely still.
The dam has to break.
The mental and emotional resistance, the anger at being sick, the desperation to control the outcome has to end before the divine power can begin its work. Groening is saying that God's healing isn't something you convince God to give you.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is a current that is already flowing, but your resistance is the dam blocking it.
Wow. And then we move from Germany to Italy to the mystic Luisa Piccarreta. She spent decades bedridden, enduring immense physical suffering, yet her writings are filled with this radiant joy.
Decades in bed.
Decades. She wrote deeply about the purpose of suffering, stating, Das Leiden, das im göttlichen Willen angenommen wird, verwandelt sich in Licht und bringt der Seele unermessliche Gnade.
Which means the suffering that is accepted in the divine will transforms into light and brings the soul immeasurable grace.
Yes.
Transforms into light. I want us to really dwell on that phrase. It is a stunning visual. It is the exact same metallurgical process Dudde described with the word Entschlacken, just expressed through the physics of light rather than the physics of metal.
From slag to light.
Exactly. Think about what happens when you fight an illness with a bitter, angry heart. The suffering remains dark. It feels heavy, opaque, and purely destructive. It crushes you.
It's just lead.
But Piccarreta argues that the very moment you yield, the moment you hand that exact same physical pain over to God's will and accept it, the fundamental nature of the suffering literally transfigures.
It changes on a molecular level.
The dark, heavy slag is burned away, and the energy of that pain is converted into pure, radiant spiritual light. It becomes a vehicle for union with the divine. The illness doesn't necessarily leave your body, but its spiritual weight turns from lead into light.
It's the alchemy of the soul.
Beautifully said.
And we see this exact same alchemy echoed hundreds of years earlier in the writings of Thomas von Kempen. In his classic work, The Imitation of Christ, which has been read by millions over the centuries, he writes, In Geduld wird die Seele geprüft und im Leiden wächst die Liebe zu Gott.
In patience, the soul is tested, and in suffering, love for God grows. Von Kempen is highlighting the stripping away of the superficial. When you are healthy, it is so easy to rely on your own strength. It is easy to love God when everything is going well.
It's a breeze.
But when you are suffering, when your status, your bank account, and what people think of you suddenly lose all their weight, Your heart is forced into a corner.
Stripped bare.
It is forced to seek something infinitely deeper than earthly comfort. Suffering tests the foundation of your love. Is your love for God conditional on your physical comfort, or is it absolute?
That's a terrifying question, and of course, this entire framework is deeply rooted in the biblical tradition itself. The source material points us to James chapter 5, verses 14 and 15, which talks about calling the elders to pray and anoint the sick, emphasizing that the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well.
Yes.
And we see Jesus constantly throughout the Gospels, like in Mark 5.34, telling the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering."
All of these voices across time. Bertha Dudde in 1963, Bruno Groening, Louisa Piccarreta in her bed in Italy, Thomas von Kempen in the 15th century, and the biblical authors thousands of years ago, they're all describing the exact same spiritual physics.
It's a universal pattern.
Surrender leads to purification. Purification leads to an intimate proximity to God. And that proximity to God is the ultimate healing, whether it manifests physically in the body or purely spiritually in the soul.
Okay, but this brings us to a massive practical crossroads. Because as I look at these sources, there is a deep tension, a paradox, really, that I want us to thoroughly wrestle with for the listener's sake.
Let's do it.
We have Derek Prince, a very well-known 20th century biblical teacher, quoted in our source material saying something that sounds very different from Dudde. He says, "Glaube ist die Hand, die Gottes Heilung ergreift."
Faith is the hand that grasps God's healing.
Right. He uses a very active verb, grasping, taking hold of it, claiming it.
Very active.
So what does this all mean? We have Piccarreta and Dudde emphasizing a completely passive approach. They talk about passively accepting suffering, yielding to it, waiting in stillness.
I see the conflict.
How does a person listening to this right now actually reconcile these two instructions? How do you actively pray and grasp for healing with your faith while simultaneously being perfectly peacefully okay with remaining sick if it is God's will?
It's a tough line to walk.
How do you fight for your health and surrender to your illness at the exact same time? It feels like a complete psychological contradiction.
It absolutely feels like a contradiction to the rational, logical mind. The rational mind demands that you choose one or the other. Either you fight the sickness or you give up and accept it.
Exactly. Pick a lane.
But in the realm of mysticism and deep spirituality, this isn't a contradiction. It is a paradox. And resolving this exact paradox within your own heart is the ultimate test of human spirituality.
Okay, walk me through it.
Let's break it down. When Derek Prince talks about faith being the hand that grasps healing, he is talking about an unwavering, absolute belief in God's ability and God's ultimate desire to heal and restore.
Its capacity to do it.
Yes. You must reach out with faith, totally rejecting despair, knowing that God is the source of all wellness and light. You don't resign yourself to darkness.
Right. You don't say, well, God just wants me to be miserable.
Exactly. You never believe God desires misery.
Yeah.
But where Dudde and Piccarreta come in is regarding the ultimate posture of the soul once that hand is reached out. They're talking about total trust in God's timing and God's method.
Ah.
Do you see the difference?
So you reach out your hand in absolute, unwavering faith that God can and will heal you. But you leave your hand open.
You leave it open.
You don't try to dictate what he puts in it. You accept whatever the divine physician actually places in your open hand. Whether that is a sudden miraculous physical recovery tomorrow morning or the invisible grace to endure another month of purification in the crucible.
Precisely. You grasp the truth of God's healing nature, but you yield to the execution of his will.
That is profound.
And this perfectly transitions us into the absolute climax of Dudde's revelation. Because in the final paragraphs, she describes what this ultimate stage of surrender, this open hand of rock-solid faith, actually looks like in practice.
Yes, the text moves into this breathtaking description of supreme surrender. She writes about the person who attains this incredibly rare level of faith.
Read that part.
Dass sich ungezweifelt meiner Macht bedienet, dass sich mir ganz und gar hingibt mit der Bitte, ihn gesunden zu lassen und auch überzeugt ist, dass seine Bitte Erhörung findet. Dann kann wahrlich jedes Wunder geschehen.
So powerful.
That he uses my power without doubt, gives himself completely to me with the request to let him recover, and is also convinced that his request will be answered. Then truly every miracle can happen.
This is a crucial validation. The text confirms that sudden miraculous healing, exactly as Jesus performed during his earthly life, defying all biological laws, is absolutely possible today.
It's not just a metaphor from the past.
No, it isn't. But it requires a state of the soul that bears absolutely zero doubt. It requires what she calls a felsenfesten Glauben, a rock-solid faith, a faith that has been so entirely purified of ego and fear that it is perfectly aligned with the divine.
Rock solid faith.
But, and this is where the text delivers its most poignant, perhaps most challenging insight of all, Dudde reveals what actually happens to the souls who manage to reach this zenith of intimacy with God.
I'm looking at that exact passage, and it gave me chills when I first read it. Because you would think that the people with the most faith would be the ones constantly receiving these sudden miracles.
Right, they'd be healed every time they sneeze.
Exactly. But she writes, Wer aber ganz innig mir verbunden ist, der steht auch schon gänzlich in meinem Willen. Und er lässet mich selbst walten und greifet nicht durch seinen Willen vor. Er trägt auch das schwerste Leid in Ergebung in meinen Will und leistet so seiner Seele einen weit größeren Dienst als durch die Gesundung des Körpers.
What a pivot.
Meaning, he who is intimately connected to me already stands entirely in my will, and he lets me reign and does not anticipate through his own will. He endures even the heaviest sorrow in submission to my will, and thus does his soul a far greater service than through the recovery of the body.
This is the ultimate spiritual plot twist.
It really is.
The people who have achieved enough faith to literally move mountains, the people who could command instant healing and receive it, they often don't ask for it.
They choose to stay in the fire.
They choose the fire. Because they are so deeply, inextricably united with God's perspective, they recognize that the suffering is doing a profound, eternal work.
They can see the big picture.
They can actually see the slag burning away from their soul. They recognize that enduring the illness is clearing the spiritual debts of their life here on earth. The text says, dass sie auch Schuld abtragen dürfte auf Erden, so that they can pay off their debts on earth, allowing them to enter the spiritual realm completely unburdened and radiant.
Wow.
They willingly choose the temporary purification of the soul over the temporary comfort of the body.
It is awe-inspiring to look at your own pain and say, let it do its work. It is a level of spiritual maturity that is hard for me to even fathom on a normal Tuesday.
It's Mount Everest level spirituality.
But the incredible beauty of this deep dive and the genius of the source material we're working from is that we don't just leave this as high-minded, untouchable theology.
No, we have to make it real.
The source material actually provides a praxis tale, a practical step-by-step section to help us bridge the gap between this lofty spiritual ideal and the reality of our own aching bodies.
And we need that bridge.
I want to walk you, the listener, through this practice right now. I'm going to go very slowly. If you are in a safe place to do so, if you aren't driving, maybe just close your eyes for a moment. Let's walk through these 5 internal steps of bringing this profound revelation into your actual physical body.
Let's do it. Step 1 is inners and vertrauen. Inner trust.
When illness or pain comes, whether it's a chronic diagnosis or just a wave of physical exhaustion, before you panic, before you rush to WebMD, before you let the anxiety spiral, you consciously stop.
You have to interrupt the panic.
Right. You breathe. And you speak quietly to the divine. Lord, I place the situation entirely in your hands. You know what is good for my soul.
That simple, deliberate shift in posture does something miraculous to the nervous system.
It does.
It opens the heart to God's working. It immediately stops the resistance that causes so much secondary suffering.
Exactly. Step 2 is actively strengthening the connection with God.
You cannot do this in the noise. Take a few minutes of pure silence every single day. No music, no screens. Just sit or lie down, breathe quietly, and pray, Jesus, you are my doctor. Touch my body, my soul, and my spirit.
By doing this, you are actively inviting the Heilstrom, that divine healing stream Bruno Gröning talked about, into your physical reality. You're opening the door for the divine physician to enter the room.
Yes. Step 3 is perhaps the most difficult, but the most transformative. Acting in love, even while in pain.
Did's text reminds us that our only true earthly purpose is to serve in love. When we're sick, we become incredibly self-focused. But even if you are bedridden, even if you are suffering deeply, you still have the capacity to generate love.
How so?
You can offer a silent, sincere prayer for the person suffering in the hospital bed next to you. You can speak a gentle, exceptionally kind word to the nurse who is drawing your blood, or the family member bringing you water.
It takes so much strength, but it's possible.
You can find one tiny microscopic thread of gratitude. That specific love, the love generated in the midst of your own pain, is incredibly powerful. It opens up massive spiritual space for grace to flood in.
It really does. Step 4 is actively strengthening your faith.
This is Derek Prince's grasping hand. In the quiet moments, speak words of absolute trust out loud. God is leading me. His love carries me. He knows the exact right time, the perfect moment for my healing.
Speaking those words changes your internal architecture.
It drives out the shadows of doubt. And as the text suggests, it often fundamentally changes the physical body's response to the illness as well.
And the final step, step 5, is accepting ultimate peace.
At the end of all your praying, at the end of all your active faith, you release your grip completely. You open your hand. And you say, Lord, thy will be done. Whatever you decide, I trust you.
Total surrender.
And it is inside that profound, unshakable peace that the deepest healing, whether it is a miraculous physical recovery or the beautiful transfiguration of your soul, finally begins.
You know, what I find so vital to remember about this entire practice is that you don't have to wait for a massive life-threatening diagnosis to start exercising these spiritual muscles.
No, not at all.
This isn't just a protocol for the intensive care unit.
The practice begins right now, today, in your immediate everyday life.
To synthesize everything we've explored in this deep dive, illness, according to Bertha Dudde, Bruno Groening, Louisa Piccarreta, and this entire chorus of mystics, is never, ever a random biological accident.
Never.
It is never evidence of God being careless, absent, or cruel. It is a highly curated, deeply loving spiritual intervention.
A spiritual tool.
It is a tool designed by a divine physician who cares infinitely more about the eternal freedom and radiance of your soul than he does about your temporary physical comfort. Illness is here to purify you. It is the crucible meant to burn away the heavy, toxic slag of the world, to teach you the profound quiet of patience, and ultimately to bring you home completely unburdened and full of light.
It changes absolutely everything about how we view our bodies, our vulnerabilities, and our pain. We want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this very special, deeply contemplative journey through this text.
Thank you for slowing down with us.
Please remember, you are seen, you are loved, and no matter what you are going through physically right now, no matter how isolating the pain feels in the middle of the night, you are never, ever alone in your suffering. The divine physician is always right there with you in the crucible. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. The next time you experience a moment of physical discomfort, and I don't mean a major illness, I mean something as incredibly minor as a tension headache from staring at your screen too long, or a stiff neck, or even just stubbing your toe.
Tossing tiny.
What if you reacted differently? What if, before you immediately reach for a pill to silence the pain, or before you instantly complain to the person sitting next to you, you just stopped?
Just for a moment.
What if you sat in total unbroken silence for just 60 seconds? What if you closed your eyes, leaned into the discomfort, and asked your soul, what is this tiny pain trying to help me let go of today?